Borderlands 3 is absolutely chock full of different weapons, and while most of them are properly rated amongst the masses, there are still quite a few that I feel are very underappreciated by the community. Hey Vault Hunters, I'm Constant Canadian, and these are the most underrated weapons in Borderlands 3. Starting off the list in no particular order, we have the Recursion. This Maliwan shotgun comes in all elements, and after a short charge up, shoots a disc that bounces between enemies, doing splash damage of the weapon's element type with each and every bounce. The Recursion used to be way more highly rated thanks to the old projectile duplication glitch, which made this weapon do so much damage it would crash consoles. Once that glitch got patched, however, a lot of the community saw it as a complete and utter nerf to the gun, and left this gun in the past. But the Recursion is still incredibly powerful. 1 month after the projectile duplication glitch was patched, Gearbox actually buffed this weapon, increasing its ricochet cap from 5 to 7. And while the Recursion did fall off a little bit after the projectile duplication glitch got patched, it is still incredibly powerful and a super fun weapon for mobbing situations, even if it is essentially useless against single targets or bosses. If you want one for yourself, it drops from General Trant in Desolation's Edge. Next up, we have the Dakota. This purple Jacob shotgun was first added with the Bounty of Blood DLC and oftentimes gets hugely overlooked, thanks to the rather shoddy reputation of uniques in Borderlands 3, but the Dakota is 100% worth using at endgame. The Dakota is a fully automatic shotgun that will sometimes shoot fire or shock bullets instead of kinetic bullets, but it gets even better. The fire pellets deal an additional 200% damage, and the shock pellets deal an additional 800% weapon damage. But wait, it gets better. Both the fire and shock pellets, in addition to dealing increased weapon damage, also deal splash damage, which adds an entire other possible modifier to this weapon's damage calculation, making it just completely insane. There are very few unique weapons in this game that are actually powerful enough to be used reliably at endgame, but the Dakota is certainly one of the few. The regular kinetic bullets are very much fine, but the elemental pellets fire often enough to make the Dakota an absolute powerhouse, especially if your build specs heavily into splash damage. If you want this thing for yourself, it comes from the central bank chest at the end of the Bounty of Blood DLC. It's also got fixed parts, so no need to farm for one. Coming up next, we have the Hornet. This doll pistol is seemingly underwhelming, just a simple 6-shot burst pistol locked to the corrosive element. However, just like its Borderlands 2 version, the Hornet's damage is counted as splash damage, making the Hornet an amazing option for most mains everywhere, or just any character with a considerable boost to splash damage. The Hornet doesn't really do anything overly special like the Dakota or other items on this list, but the Hornet is just overall a really strong pistol that I personally feel gets overlooked quite a bit. If you want one for yourself, it drops from the Mother of Grogans in the Anvil. Moving on now to the Faisor. This Vladoff assault rifle comes in all elements and shoot bullets that have a flight trail and deal pretty low damage. At least that's what the primary fire mode does. The real power of the Faisor actually lies within its secondary fire mode. The secondary fire mode on this weapon will always be an underbarrel shotgun that shoots 8 pellets, each of which deal 4.2 times the damage of the primary fire mode. These shotgun pellets also deal splash damage, making this weapon incredibly powerful for Moes. This weapon used to be a complete dud with low damage in both firing modes, but thanks to a buff in May of 2020, the underbarrel shotgun on the Faisor is now one of the strongest shotguns in the game. The only real downside of the underbarrel shotgun on this weapon is its limited magazine size, but it slowly regenerates over time, so it usually balances itself out. The Faisor is definitely a lot better rated than it was, but there's still a lot of people who just don't know how powerful the underbarrel shotgun on this weapon is. If you want one of these for yourself, it drops from Atomic on the Tazandir Ruins map. The Wedding Invitation is our next underrated weapon. This Jacob sniper is locked to fire and cryogenic, and is fully automatic as well. Upon scoring a critical hit, the Wedding Invitation returns 1 bullet to its magazine, creates a fire explosion, and ricochets a cryo projectile towards the nearest enemy. But wait, it gets even more complicated. The fire explosion deals fire splash damage and makes the affected enemies take plus 50% damage from all fire damage and plus 25% damage from all cryo damage. And the ricocheted cryo projectile deals splash damage and makes affected enemies take plus 50% damage from all cryo damage and plus 25% damage from all fire damage. Each of these debuffs can stack up to 4 times. The Wedding Invitation, much like the name suggests, was added during the Broken Hearts Day event, and it was quite beloved at the time. But once the event ended, level cap increased, and the projectile duplication glitch got passed, people kind of forgot about this absolute powerhouse of a sniper. but it is still an amazing option. If you want one for yourself, it can drop from loot hearts, or you can get one guaranteed if you break 100 hearts with the Broken Hearts event active. Coming up next, we have the Scorpio. This TDR pistol is only available in non-elemental, and upon reloading, it will stick to surfaces and deploy as a turret. This gun is very clearly a reference to Roland's Scorpio turret from the first game, which makes it even funnier that as a turret, the Scorpio absolutely sucks. But if you completely ignore the one thing that actually makes this gun unique and just use it as a standard pistol, the Scorpio can be pretty damn strong. Mind you, the Scorpio isn't going to be absolutely destroying endgame bosses or the Maliwan takedown, but for most content, the Scorpio absolutely does more than enough damage. The Scorpio is pretty much as close as you can get in this game to a basic pistol that does good damage, and if you want one for yourself, it drops from Lieutenant Preston in the Tazandir Ruins map. Alright, this next one is actually the next 6 or so, but by far, some of the most underrated weapons are the legendary Atlas weapons. While I'm not even personally a fan, and there are bad legendary Atlas weapons like the Carrier or the Rebel Yell, there are also a pretty decent amount of good Atlas legendaries. Everybody knows about the OPQ system and how strong it can be, but Atlas also makes 2 amazing legendary pistols, the Replay and the Multi-Tap, as well as making the Ruby's Wrath and the Plumage, which, similar as they may be, are both very strong rocket launchers. On top of that, the non-uniques offered by Atlas are pretty decent as well, like the Q system and the AX-19. While Atlas does get hurt quite a bit by being essentially locked to non-elemental, they still have plenty of really good legendary weapons, and at least half of them are more than good enough to handle most content in the game. The Miscreant is another weapon that almost nobody talks about, but it is yet another one that can be very strong. This flat-off pistol comes in all elements as well as non-elemental, and fire rockets that explode on impact, dealing splash damage of the weapon's elements. The Miscreant also always spawns with a double barrel attachment, increasing its already high fire rate by an additional 25%. If this gun sounds or looks familiar to you, it might be due to the fact that it's essentially just a one-handed Ogre assault rifle. It does more damage than the Ogre, shoots faster than the Ogre, is far more accurate than the Ogre, and unlike the Ogre, can come in every element. The only thing that the Miscreant has worse than the Ogre is its very small magazine size, but that can be solved with a simple class mod passive. The Miscreant is realistically everything the Ogre should have been, and is an incredibly strong option if you're sick of using the same old pistols time and time again. If you want the Miscreant for yourself, it can drop from the Quartermaster in the Bounty of Blood DLC. Next up, we have the Hail, another worthwhile unique weapon. This dual assault rifle is available in all elements as well as non-elemental, and shoots projectiles in an arcing trajectory. This projectile trajectory makes the gun a little difficult to aim. However, if you learn how to properly aim it, you are greatly rewarded for it, as the Hail also has a critical hit modifier of 150%, making critical hits with the Hail absolutely deadly. On top of that, the Hail has an insanely high base damage, with each pellet dealing over 70,000 damage at level 72 Mayhem 10. The Hail is a tough weapon to learn to aim, but once you learn to aim it properly, it becomes an absolute killing machine. Additionally, the Hail also has a 10% lifesteal, which can save you points into a lifesteal skill. I personally think the reason nobody talks about the Hail is due to the fact that it comes from the same place as the Crit, which tends to overshadow it quite a bit. However, both the Crit and the Hail are amazing weapons that work for most of, if not all of the game's content. If you want the Hail for yourself, you need to tip Moxie on Sanctuary until she mails you this weapon. And finally, one of the game's most underrated legendary weapons, the 7th Sense, a Jacob's pistol that is locked to the cryo element. The 7th Sense is another weapon that benefited greatly from the aforementioned projectile duplication glitch, as when shooting an enemy, the gun will spawn 3 new projectiles that swirl above the initial target, and these projectiles will then home in on the initial target when the 7th Sense is reloaded. The biggest problem with the 7th Sense is that it cannot be anointed, which makes quite a few people dismiss it immediately as just another pistol that can't be anointed. It also doesn't help that the Queen's Call has a very similar effect and can be anointed. But the 7th Sense is insanely powerful, with a higher base damage than the Queen's Call, significantly lower ammo consumption, and a much higher fire rate. Not to mention the lack of a need for critical hits. The 7th Sense is an insanely powerful pistol and was responsible for me hitting my first billion damage. If you want this amazing pistol for yourself, it's a quest reward from the final mission Forgotten Answers in the Cold Case quest chain from the Guns, Love, and Tentacles DLC. While these 10 weapons may not be the strongest out there, they are certainly more than capable of doing most, if not all of the game's content, and are a nice change of pace from using the same meta weapons day in and day out. Thank you all so much for watching, have a fantastic day.